Hi, everybody. Frank Gladstone here. And today we're talking to Jane Samborski and Dash Shaw, the creators of a brand new film, Cryptozoo, which is just coming out. You're going to be seeing it. And you'll probably want to know a lot about it because it is not your grandfather's animated movie. It's quite a bit different. It's an indie film. And I want to talk a little bit, but first I'm going to talk a little bit about Jane. She was the animation director, right, Jane, on this show?
Yes.
And also, you kind of set the schedule because I understand in the first movie about your high school sinking. As I've read, the schedule is on post-it notes and napkins and things like that. And this one, you actually made an Excel production sheet. Is that correct?
Yeah, I definitely did take we had I was had a producer role in the first one, uncredited, because I was sort of managing how the whole project was organized. But this one was just so much larger in scale that we had to harness the power of technology to prevent matrimonial murders.
Oh, that's right. You guys are married. Excellent. And have started a family and have a cat as well. So that's that's really great. Two cats and a child. um, so you kind of became, as well as the animation director, you're kind of the production manager, I guess I could say. Yeah, right.
It's such a small team. It's hard
It's
to take on titles because everybody's doing so many things and everybody's doing everybody else's jobs, and but that's the one we decided on for the credits.
That's good. Everybody needs that. You know, I've seen I've worked on a few features and I've seen the gigantic, 600 person crew schedules, and that's a whole other ball of
I'm
wax.
lucky it was not that big.
Yeah,
I'm grateful that it was at least a small team. It meant more work for everybody, but it also meant less logistical nightmares.
right. And Dash, you're a comic book guy initially, right? I mean, that's kind of how you started. Um, Both of you are artistically trained, went to school for this. Um, so tell me a little bit about how the comic books, and you've done several, and you have another one, a collection coming out pretty soon. I'm trying to remember. It's called, uh, I'm trying
Discipline?
to, Discipline, right?
Yeah, that's a book come later this year that I worked on for many years. Yeah.
Are all of them, because you've done a lot of other ones as well, are all of them paperwork at home and like
Yeah,
that?
and the animation that I was exciting to me had a relationship to comics, whether it's like Winsor McKay's first animations or like the Speed Racer show is based on a comic. Just the kind of comic cartoon connection was really built into me.
Right, right. And I'm almost old enough to have known Winsor McKay. Not quite, but almost, almost. Um, Actually, I met his son a couple
Oh,
of times. Oh, yeah, because we have the Annie Awards, which I'm not going to plug now, has a Winsor McKay Award, which is a Lifetime Achievement Award. So one day in 30 years, you guys may get that, but I have to be a lifetime, and
cool.
it's named after Winsor McKay. Anyway, I was reading a little about your process, and it's basically I mean, yes, there's some technology involved, but your process is basically a paper process. You do a lot of drawing.
We definitely do a lot of drawing. Almost exclusively, the art assets used in the movie start as physical objects.
Right.
There's there are exceptions to every
Yeah.
rule for everything that I'm going to say, but almost everything, I work with gouache and Dash, most of his drawings are in pencil. I painted almost all the cryptids and I paint absurdly small. And then Dash is, in so many ways, we're wonderful opposites. And Dash is always drawing very large.
Yeah.
So sometimes it'll be like taking two things drawn at very different scales and figuring out a way to get them to work together. But it's all like pencil on paper and gouache paint, watercolor, airbrush paint, acrylic paint backgrounds, all
But without the power of the technology, the process would be impossible, because so much of what we're doing is experimentation that's facilitated by the flexibility of digital media. So while the pictures that we're using are practically made, without the ability to play around with the way the motion is happening, we would never have arrived at something that I think was as successful as Cryptozoo is.
Yeah,
and then that, the last step often is it has to kind of pass an eye test of being something that was made, before Photoshop ran everything.
So that the computer, while being a critical tool in the process, is not what you see when you see the final product. What you're seeing is the artistry, that you're never tripping over the digital nature of the process.
So basically, the computer allows you to composite maybe things of different colors or different sizes or anything like that, and composite with other hand-drawn stuff in foregrounds and backgrounds and like that. Yeah, you couldn't do it on
It's
cell.
also not just compositing. A lot of the animation is actually generated in the computer. I liken our process to 2D paper puppets, kind of those hinged puppets that you make as a kid. And all of those mathematical, like what angle things are happening at, all that interpolation is being done in the computer.
Right.
But yeah, when Jane says animations, he's talking about the movement. So while the drawing itself might be a physical asset, it's being moved by the computer.
Yeah. Have you guys ever seen The Adventures of Prince Ahmed?
Yes, I love seeing Lottie Reiniger's work. Changed my life. It was one of the things that I saw in college that just opened my mind in a way that made something that had not seemed accessible to me accessible. I found it unbelievably inspirational.
Yeah.
And we just saw some of our originals in Annecy.
Yes, it was jaw-dropping. And to see, just for me, the actual how it was constructed, and this is how those joints are being. I was thrilled to see the original. They were gorgeous.
The interesting thing, one of the other interesting things, I saw an interview with their producer years ago. It's an older interview now. When they did Ahmed, and they built a down shooter, a kind of a predecessor to the multiplane camera that Disney would later build. The garret that they worked in was so small that the ceiling was so small that they actually had to work on their knees. The small crew was 4 people, kind of a small crew like you guys have, and we'll talk about it a little bit. And he said at lunchtime they'd all come out to lunch and they'd all be creaking and trying to get back into, you suffer for your art, right? So
and it was my understanding that the cameraman was her husband.
Your husband, yeah.
Yeah, and so there's this long history of couples working together, having a romantic relationship and then having this artistic relationship. Right. And I think that happens a lot in animation because you can't do animation on your own. It's such a huge project and it takes a lot of trust because you're putting in so much effort. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that many of those relationships grow out of romantic relationships, or romantic relationships grow out of the artistic relationships.
Mine too, but we don't talk about me at this stage again. But there's a woman behind this facade who has been with me for a long time, and used to shoot the animation when I was in my studio days. Anyway,
and in comics, there's a huge, men as the people doing the line work or writing the stories, and then women as colorists is also a major theme.
In the 80s, but now there's some. I think now it's different. But there a lot of my favorite cartoonists in the 80s, like David Mazzucchelli and Richmond Lewis. They were a couple that did some great comics together.
Yeah, it's really pretty great. My mentor's wife was an inker painter at the Fleischer studio where he met her, and he trained her to be an assistant, but she assisted onward from there. So that in the olden days, the very olden days. We're going to talk about the movie a little bit. And in watching it, I didn't know what to expect. It had zoo and it had crypto, and I thought, well, I don't know, And again, it isn't your grandpa's movie, your animated film, it starts off quite different than you might expect for an animated movie. It's not a children's film, so to speak. It has lots of sex, violence. I kind of made a note. It said sex, violence, mythological beasts, nightmares, vendettas, betrayal, parody, conspiracy theories, strip clubs, Pamela Coleman Smith's tarot cards, covert military ops, all rolled into a fantasy drama adventure story. Does that sound fair?
Sounds great. You're selling the movie well.
Because it does take you by surprise. It takes you on a kind of a dreamscape as far as I was concerned. How did you come up with this idea and decide to do it? What was the evolution of the original idea?
It was a few things at once. One was seeing this unfinished Winsor McCay short film, The Centaurs, from 1920. And that's on YouTube. I'm sure your audience is familiar with it, but that has, I think, a kind of sexiness to it, a kind of weird adult quality to that cartoon. And then, the fact that it was unfinished was inspiring. And I think of Winsor McCay's projects as mostly about kind of things that drawing can do that other mediums can't do. And in this case, it was seeing mythological beings. They can't be photographed. So that was exciting. And around that same time, Jane had an all women's Dungeons and Dragons group, and I wanted to write something that she would enjoy participating in. And I think that kind of inspired the mostly female cast of the movie. And also at the same time, I had a fellowship at the New York Public Library working on that discipline book, and one of the other fellows there was researching countercultural newspapers of the 1960s that had it, that from around the world, so it'd be like a 1967 free weekly paper in Brazil and that same week in Chicago. And they all had a kind of similar, almost Winsor McCay-ish line quality in the drawings. And they all had this incredible kind of optimism in them. The titles would just be like one word things like progress or something, So as is usual with these kind of writing things, it's like a few kind of unexpected connections arise in different things, and you start to form a story. And I think in this case, it was the relationship between the three people in the Cryptozoo, the Joan and Lauren and Phoebe, a cryptid herself, and their kind of conversation about their motivations around the cryptids being different. And then that was kind of the meat of the story. And in the movie, it's like kind of literally the middle 30 minutes of the movie is their kind of conversation about it. And I mean, I could just keep blabbing, but then kind of constructing the people who come across the zoo as like the audience's eyes, the first kind of 10 minutes of the movie.
Right. Well, first of all, there was you mentioned a Dungeons and Dragons coffee clatch, I guess, or some sort of a group.
Yeah, I really wanted to play role-playing games, and it's much better now. The culture around is much better now, but you hear some horror stories about women going to a group of all men, and they're all kind of like socially awkward, and so I would only play with women. And so that was just, we would kick Dash out of the apartment and we would kill monsters. And
but now what I was trying to get to was the group, the personalities of your group. Did that inform the personalities of the three main characters?
See, I wasn't there.
Yeah, we kicked him out.
So it's more my imagination
of what was happening in the apartment while he was gone. Because it's really weird to pretend to talk in your silly voice. And
yeah, but okay, so now you've got this kind of dramatic idea, right, of these pioneer or women and they all have issues, and I don't want to give any spoilers, but they've got issues, and they are in search of a particular mythological being. Now, all the mythological beings, as far as I could tell in watching the movie, they're actually mythological beings that come from different cultures. Is that true?
Yeah, that was something that Dash really wanted. For sure, every mythological creature had to have a historical foundation in a real culture. We did not invent anything.
That was one of the very first ideas, because I thought that what would be interesting, is that it would be a fantasy movie about our world,
Right.
and that would be a constantly kind of uncomfortably close to our world, because so many fantasies are kind of in a safer, clear allegorical space that is removed from you. Yeah, I thought that that would be exciting, and then it would kind of be about how our world um, treats the imaginations of different cultures, or kind of, whether it be like a zoo, or a museum, like ways that people try to introduce things from other cultures, and in introducing it end up harming its power in some way.
Well, in a way, the movie, it makes comments on that kind of thing, popular culture, how popular culture, I mean, they want to create I don't want to give away too much, but there's a theme park element to this, but it's a cynical theme. I mean, the position of, is this really a good idea? Is that
Yeah, I think it's kind of like Jurassic Park, in that um, y- the per at minute 5, you know that the park isn't going to work out.
yeah, right.
Um, so then the movie is seeing its fall, and you're like, how is it going to fall, or why are we being shown this, rather whether or not it's going to fall. It's going to be a
What I enjoyed though is you give the argument for it.
totally.
Yeah, you give the argument, well, we have to make money in order to do it. And so the rationale is there. And you do that for the other things too. There's a rationale, even though, and I don't want to give away, there's a rationale about the military use. There's a rationale about the idea of capitalism, and that kind of runs through this thing as well. So I thought that was, these kind of things may be touched upon in more mainstream animated films and live action films, but the discussion in an animated movie especially was pretty interesting to me.
Yeah, like Disney pops up in the movie constantly, and it's kind of, the Epcot Center, where it was originally going to be an actual city where people would live, and then when he died, it was turned into an amusement park.
Yeah.
This so
Something
I,
that that it's set. It's quasi historical.
Yeah.
I mean, it is theoretically set, in this same countercultural movement that Dash was talking about with these older newspapers. But I mean, we know that didn't work out. That the idealism of that time may have come from an honest place, but it didn't. Idealism alone will not solve the world's problems, and I think that
you're saying we know how the 60s worked out,
right.
So we have a perspective that's,
Yeah.
when you said it's not your grandfather's cartoons, what's funny to me hearing that is, I feel like so many of the touchstones for the movie are things that possibly were my grandfather's cartoons, whether it's like
Zap
Fantastic
Comics,
or Winsor McKay, or so but I know what you mean, that it's that. But I also want to say, our first film, High School Sinking, I kind of thought that especially because I was roping in Jane and other people, that it should kind of exist in a PG 13-ish space. But when that movie came out, it just played, New York Film Festival and TIFF, and it played Metrograph Theater. It was not a kid space, and when I saw that, I was like, oh,
Great,
great.
let's make our house movies.
I
That's what we
didn't.
wanted to do anyway.
We wanted to make movies for, people our own age anyway, and so it.
Well, the interesting thing, because I've, in my experience, which is when at a big studio where there's this risk of millions and millions and millions of dollars, although the animation rank and file crew may want to say, we want to do something more adult, more, more like that. When you're risking $1 zillion, it has to, the general idea is it has to reach out to 8 to 80, So you have to write for that wide mass, because you have to have the wide mass come into the theater. When you're doing an indie film, in a way, because the risk is, the personal risk for you guys may be as much, but the business risk is less for the distributor and so forth, and the money is way less. But sometimes less money is more freedom.
Yeah, I think that's something that Dash and I have struggled with a little bit. When we planned Cryptozoo, we thought we were going to have a much larger budget, and yeah, I'll answer the question. You go deal with the girl.
That's great.
Yeah, so there was this talk of having a huge team and hiring an outside studio, and I'm freaking out because I don't know how to run any of that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and early on we hired a couple people, and I didn't know even what to have them do, because I wasn't used to working in that way. It's a completely different way of working than the process where you're like, okay, who's going to draw this? Oh, it's me. Who's going to animate this? Oh, it's me. Who's doing the background? Oh, it's still me. But when you're doing everything, you have so much control, and that is an amazing feeling, and you can take risks. And because you aren't sending this thing down this extended pipeline, you can say, okay, today I'm going to mess around and I'm going to figure out how to make this moment in the movie work. Right. And I don't have to direct. I don't have to know in advance and tell 15 other people what their jobs are to make this work, because it's small, it's me, and you get this amazing nimbleness. When things aren't working, you can fix them. When you have to change course, you can change course. When someone has a great idea, you can honor that great idea without the potential loss that I think that you sometimes get in these huge machines. It would be lovely to feel a little bit more secure.
Yeah.
I think everybody hopes for that in their lives, but I feel really lucky to be working in the way that we are working. And
look what you've accomplished as well. I mean, there's 2 movies out now, well, and within a space of, I guess, around 6 years, right? Something like that.
Yeah, each one has taken about 4 or 5 years.
And that's the normal. On a big mainstream picture, that's the normal schedule, 4 years. So here you had a very small crew. I think I counted 20, something like that altogether, and you've done a picture in 4 years.
And I mean, when you're talking about like the actual animation team, the people making the motion, it's Emily and I are doing 90% of that.
Right.
It's a very small team.
You're talking about Emily Wolver, right?
Yes, who is a spectacular artist. And God, if you're working on a small team, every person has to be a superstar, and she is a superstar. One of the great joys of this project was she came on as an intern initially. She was coming out of the local university, and the way she grew over the course of the project, and for me to trust someone to the extent that I trust her as much as I trust Dash. And it has been absolutely amazing to be in that mentorship situation. And I never want to lose her, because I can't imagine working without her.
We'll have to get another project right away, which we will talk about near the end.
Yeah, well, she's going to go off on her own, and she's a person to watch for sure. Eventually.
So the picture has commentary. It makes commentary on popular culture and military and everything. I noticed an interesting thing, and I suspect at the very beginning there's a reference to an attack on the Capitol. And it isn't the attack on it is an attack on the Capitol by disenfranchised people, not the same people that we've actually seen the attack on the Capitol that we did see. Did that come in late, or is that a prescient thing that was part of your initial script?
No, that was totally that was recorded. Michael Cera sang that in 2017.
There you go. Yeah.
So we did not know what was going to happen.
And that script was written
Yeah,
before Trump was elected.
Yeah, 2015.
So it was just kind of serendipity that it was, or part of the story. I thought as much.
We had the biggest freak out when that happened. It was
also
there was no changing anything.
It premiered at Sundance, which was like in January.
Yeah, literally 2 weeks after the incident happened. And
but for the of course, we thought a lot about it, and I think that the kind of optimism, the Trumpers didn't invent that idea, of course, and the idealism in that, I think, true to the idealism of that time, and it's definitely, I think, showed me that you can work on something for years and really feel like you're conscious of all of the associations or connections that you're making, but that ultimately when it comes out, you're kind of handing it to the audience, and they're in their time and place, which is different than the time and place that you made it in, and they are gonna complete the picture in their heads. So you do maybe 70% and they do 30%, and you have to kind of.
And I think as long as you treat each of the things that you are speaking about with as much honesty as you can bring to it, that it's going to hold its water when.
But ultimately it's kind of a pass off to the people, and I have to kind of accept that and love the exchange.
I think that's true. Everybody has their own lens and brings their own stuff to whatever they're looking at, any art and any music.
3 years from now, there might be other things in the movie that are unexpected.
Yeah. Well, it was an interesting kind of, whoa, look at that, But I thought probably it was in there first, unless you quick get the paintbrushes. Let's, no.
Yeah.
So now I want to talk a little about the production, because it is a very indie film. I'm sure the budget was nothing, pennies on the dollar compared to other animated movies. You have a very small crew. And I noticed when I was looking at the credits at the end of the movie that the crew, your small crew, was assigned sequences to do. So this one had this room, and this one had
that. They were sequences. It's that we wrote what they did. So like, if someone did the backgrounds on, the black cat scene or something, I wrote black cat backgrounds in the credits. And I did this because I thought that rather than just listing names under background artists, that then they could maybe feel a bit more ownership or identity, connected to what they contributed to the movie. But at the same time, there's tons of things that Jane and I did that we didn't write there because we're getting credit in other ways. So it's not.
The way to think about a production. The way to think about the production is that Dash, me, and Emily, we are the stars of the show, and that we have brought in, but that we get stale, we get boring. I get tired of looking at Dash's drawings. We come up with the same solution, and so we have amazing guest stars that have come in and done pieces that have allowed us to riff in a sequence to make each moment in the movie feel like it's got fresh ideas.
Right.
So, I mean, Dash drew virtually every character in the film. I painted virtually every cryptid. I did virtually all the watercolor paintings. Emily did a ton of drawing. And then there's exceptions to that. And it's those exceptions and honoring each of the artists that brought work to us that makes it feel so fresh.
Something that Ralph Bakshi did that I really like, that I think is one of his main inventions in my mind, is kind of casting artists like you'd cast actors. And so if you know, like Mike Ploog, you see that he did The Prelude and Wizards, and it feels like a Mike Ploog drawing, and he didn't create a style guide and tell Mike Ploog to draw in the style guide, but he cast them. And then those movies become just like how you have different actors interacting with each other. There's different artists that have their own identities working with each other, and the movie is, you know, their collage or their conversation. And so it doesn't feel like just a bunch of random stuff, and it also doesn't feel like a bunch of different people forced to draw in one way. So that's the goal.
Yeah, I mean, you know, in more mainstream pictures, there's style guides and there's on model, what's called on model, which is a a big thing. In this particular picture, while the characters remain consistent, they are different, you know, and sometimes
Yeah,
they look a little bit.
deliberately draws off model frequently. He loves seeing that in other works, and so there is very little effort to keep it super consistent from frame to frame.
Not to get cheesy, but it's just like in figure drawing class where someone at one angle on one day looks a little different than that same person at a different angle on another different day.
Right.
Or even just drawing the same person in an hour period, and you're seeing them, and it's like that Picasso thing of seeing different sides of someone, and it's the human condition of different conflicting personalities. So I also, part of limiting the frame rate allows you to make bigger leaps in the drawings, so that you can go from someone who looks one way to another way and have them both register as drawings, as opposed to flying past the screen very quickly.
And I alluded to earlier to the glorious nimbleness of the small team. And part of that is that I don't have to worry about 8 people knowing what I want, because I know it's going to land on my desk. And part of my job is to say, how can I make this scene interesting? And we really did work scene by scene by scene. And, sometimes there would be very long periods of time, and I would come back and I'd say, oh, this look isn't really working for me anymore. But because each one was kind of a self-contained project, it allowed for unique, bespoke solutions for every single minute of the film.
Right. And it does work. I mean, you don't get lost and say who's that or what's going on here. It is a complex kind of film in a way, but you kind of figure out where everything is as it moves along, as the narrative moves along. I don't want to, there's some really interesting parts, but I don't want to I don't want to do spoilers. So I'm trying to be really careful about certain aspects that I really enjoyed watching, because it is not like what you normally might see in an animated movie. I also noticed that we've mentioned the crew's very small. There's a fair amount of Samborskis on the crew, Jane. So
I
recruited people, you know?
My parents are both trained artists, and that was their career when I was growing up. And when I needed extra hands, I was lucky enough to be able to go to them and pull their talent into the
They're
film.
her parents. Yeah.
My mom and my dad.
There you go.
And we're just incredibly lucky for all the people who are on this team.
I hope they didn't demand too much money for pay.
No, and they gave us free babysitting too. It was great.
Oh, that's the best. That's worth it. That's worth it. So I also noticed a thank you to Lena. There's a lot of thank yous. So I suppose people helped you out in various different ways in the picture. But there's a special thank you to Lena Dunham. Now, I know she was a voice in the first movie, and she's famous and all that kind of stuff. But
yeah, I met her at the Sundance Labs. And she was very helpful early on in this movie, kind of at an early stage with getting other cast members. And so she was so helpful enough that we offered her a producer credit, but she said, don't worry about it. So then I thought, we got to give her some extra special thanks there.
Right.
So that's why she's at the top of that thank yous.
Now you have a pretty interesting cast of all professional actors. It seems to me almost all of them professional actors. Some with bigger names than others, but or with bigger names in other countries than here. How did you go about casting it?
Well, we recorded, high, like I said with Michael, that we recorded that in 2017. That was right when High School Sinking came out in theaters, and so I try to jump into these little moments of opportunity where people are psyched about you. So we got Michael and Louisa Krause to do. They're the two hippies at the very beginning of the movie. So we recorded them, and we made the prelude of the movie, and we used that to show other actors so that they knew what they were getting themselves into, as well as, of course, the script and High School Sinking. And Lake Bell, had done a movie all about voice acting, and so that was really exciting, because then I thought I would be asking someone who is not seeing this as some weird side job, but is kind of entering into it with an extra purpose or conviction, or has at least thought a lot about voice performances.
Then you had Zoe was in it. She's got quite a reputation as well, and comes from a long line of movie makers as well. So it was good to see. It was good to see it, and the voice acting is real good, and seems to fit the movie, seems to fit the characters. So that's what you want to do. I did want to talk about, and we do a lot of these Q&As or interviews with various filmmakers of all stripes, indies and big times, mainstreams and in-betweens and everything like that. And one of the questions we're asking everybody, because everybody has been through it, is working through COVID. And surprisingly, in animation in general, kind of did okay in COVID. And I'm asking you, how did it work for you? Because a lot of this, some of this was done while COVID was going on, yeah?
Well, the vast majority of the artists outside Dash and I were working remotely anyway. They were working in their home studios and sending scans or originals to us. Emily, my right-hand gal, had been working on location and didn't feel comfortable doing that. And so we handed her her machine, and she worked from, 5 blocks away.
Right, yeah.
We did lose we were relying to some degree on interns from the local university, and that had to stop. But all told, very little changed for us. I think the hardest part was figuring out childcare.
Yeah, and actually our composer, who we had talked to before COVID, had become much more well known in the years while we had been working on the movie, and he had all of these tours lined up, and we really only got him to compose our movie because his tours had been canceled and he was at home quarantined. So in that way we
sort of lucked out. It helped us more than it hurt us.
Yeah. And animation in general because animation is so used to people working from home. I even remember in the paper days, guys working from home, putting the papers between cardboards and sending them, to LA from Miami, where I was from, or things like that. So and it took a very small amount of time from the time the lockdown to everybody was being productive again. And I guess that's what seems to have happened. Now, the movie has a lot of violence in it, right? And a fair amount of nudity as well, which will set it apart from a PG. I don't know what it's going to be rated, or if it even is going to be rated. It's coming out through Magnolia. There is a fair amount of shooting and stuff like that. How did you approach that? Why did you think that was necessary? Is it necessary? What was the idea behind that? Because that's probably the most controversial part of the movie. Anyway.
Well, I don't know what you're gonna say, Jane. So I don't.
Well, I was going to talk about, you know, the violence is really gory,
Yeah.
and kind of get asked about it a lot. And I think most people assume that viciousness that's in it comes from Dash, but weirdly, it comes from me. And I think for me, if you're going to have violence, it needs to be horrible, because violence is horrible. And violence is unfortunately a part of life. And the way that it gets glossed over in so much media, I find far more disturbing than the actual blood and nastiness that is in Cryptozoo.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, Jane is I consider a realistic animator, and that there's a realism in her movement. So I think she brought that to the violence. But the begin, yeah, I don't. It's kind of weird to. I don't want to give things away for people who haven't seen it, but you know, the violence is allegorical, obviously, when you're dealing with kind of the death of a mythological being, and I think that if it shouldn't be a joke, and it shouldn't be a symbol of something. Like, I think Jane's animation made it actually feel painful, which is how it should feel. But you know, neither Jane nor I are like gore hounds or something. It's
Yeah,
it's
I can't watch.
we're
like
we take it seriously. Like, we're not out to.
And it comes across that way too. The pain is the pain depicted seems real. It's an animated movie, you know, but it seems legitimate. It's just that people should know that it's not, you know, nobody's singing a song and tap dancing.
Amy Taubin wrote a great thing about Cryptozoo and Art Forum, and she described the death in Bambi as hyper real, and I think that's you know, true. There's like a realism to it, but obviously it's distorted and amplified in some way.
Yeah.
And you know, the nudity in it, I feel like is relates to figure drawing, and having spent years figure drawing and loving the human form, and I don't really get asked that. There isn't that. I don't know.
Well, there's one character that
she's nude
naked most of the time. So, and that's, you know, okay. Again, it's part of the story. There's other characters, I don't want to give away that much too, that have other things that are obviously not normal, or normal, you know, normal's not the word, that have other things that set them apart. I think that's what
they're outside the normal bounds of societal expectation.
In one way or another, almost all the characters, in one way, either emotionally or their physical being, is outside of normal. And you know, I think it kind of continues to create the dreamscape of the picture, if you want to put it that way, because the picture is about dreams, you know, I could say that, and the picture honors that in a way. So at least
at the beginning of the script, there was a quote, a Picasso quote.
Yeah.
Everything that you can dream is.
Everything that you can imagine is real.
Yeah.
But you know, it's been said before by many people, but it's true that films can create a dream state, you know, more than I think other media, and that when a movie's working well, it has that kind of altered reality. Even, you know, just the edit, a cut from one thing to another, is something about that is dreamlike.
I once was talking to one of my mentors, a guy named Ray Harryhausen. I don't know if you know who Ray Harryhausen was.
Totally.
Yeah. And he said the same thing. He said, I'm not trying to create reality here. It's a dreamscape.
And
that,
you know, those mythology films are obviously very inspiring.
Yeah, they're pretty great. He was a pretty great guy too. So I always say, it's almost an hour since we've been talking, which is, I have one last question, which I always like to ask of you guys. What's next? Besides the comics, the comics that are coming out, Dash, what's What's
Well,
next as far as
you know,
animated film?
we'd love to keep making these. You know, um, you know, I hope everyone sees this on August 20th to kind of help us
Get some enthusiasm for the next project.
yeah, help us keep on going.
There
Well,
is a project in the early stages of production. How I've been teasing it is that it's got 300% more dragon.
Yeah, more
There
dragon.
you go. More dragon. That's good. Dragons are good. Dragons are tight. Anyway, so it's going to show this interview is going to be posted on our ASIFA channel, YouTube channel, and the movie is going to be promoted, and there's going to be a screener for all of the ASIFA members, all of the professional members, and everybody will get, well, actually the whole membership, and everybody will get to see it, and it'll be, and
Thank you
hopefully
all for
word of-
thank you.
watching. Yay.
So I want to thank you. It's been wonderful to talk with you. It's been a real eye opener, and I've enjoyed it very much. So I hope you guys have too. Everybody, go see the movie. Go see the movie, so they can make another one with a whole bunch more dragons. Thanks, thank you both. Thanks, Jane. Thanks, Dash.
Thank you.